Next is from Chris Graham. The subject is practical effects in wrestling. Morning, guys. Since blood has not been allowed in WWE for years, other than the blood capsule spot they use from time to time, should WWE start using practical makeup effects to reflect their big beatdown angles? No, they don't need to. That show doesn't need the gratuitous side effects. You know, they don't need the blood. They don't need the cussing. They just don't need it. And then look at the numbers. They have a successful product. Staying away from all that stuff, because like that's the thing. But people don't understand this. You know, there's people out there that get uncomfortable seeing blood, and those are fans. And if they see blood, they may change the channel. You know, like, and then so you don't, and they have kids, and the parents don't want to see the kids listening to the cussing and seeing the blood and stuff. Like, you know, that there some conservative parents out there that are part of the fan base, and like you have to market to them, which is why they don't do all that, which is why they draw way more people than the other products do. You know, do you get any comment on that?
Yeah, there could be something to that. There's too much blood on AEW, which people are turned off on, but they're probably banking on the people that are turned on to it, because you've got blood in UFC, blood in boxing, blood in video games. You know, it's blood in movies. You know, like, but there's people that it's offended by. You know, like even in Mexico, they've told us to tone down on blood. And like, for example, you know those sticks that the hardcore guys stick into their head? Mm-hmm. I don't even know what they're called. Like, we used to do that, and they're like, you can't do that anymore. We used to do a stapler spot where you would staple something to the guy's head. We can't do that anymore on TV. So, you know, they're cracking down in Mexico.
They're called skewers.
Skewers, all right.
Yeah, and for the Raven thing, he's a spiritual advisor to Ricky Shane Page and Akira.
Who? Wait a minute.
MLW
Who's the other guy? Who?
Ricky Shane Page. I think he's like a hardcore wrestler. I'm not sure. And then Akira I guess it's a Japanese guy. I'm not sure.
Who's that?
But you know what? I found that question kind of interesting, because there's something psychologically where with fans and even with wrestlers themselves, like, Conan, if you were going to bleed in a match, you're going to blade. You're not going to use a blood capsule, right?
Right.
But why?
Because blood keeps trickling down, and it's real.
So you don't have to. Yeah. But I mean, why does that matter to the fans if we know it's predetermined that it has to be real blood? Because I think
the fans know, because that's the whole point of real blood. It's like you're trying to rise to the level where the suspension of disbelief, meaning these guys are feuding and they're bloodying each other up, and it's real. So, which is why you need to have guys that can work that way, that look like they're fighting, which is what, you know, and because people know the difference between fake blood and real blood. Fake blood does not take the suspension.
It doesn't amp you up.
It doesn't take you into the suspension of disbelief where you need to be, where you think it's real. You know,
but at the same time,
the whole point of blood.
We'll accept like a crash pad in a big table spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but blood is like, that's an old, you know.
It is. It's an old. It's in the DNA of wrestling. For example,
okay, when I used to go to the Omni in Atlanta, a hotbed for professional wrestling in the South, right? And say Dusty and Flair were like, you know, they'd been feuding for 2 months, 3 months, and this was the big blow off. You know, there'd be blood, and it was the only match that had blood. You know, and it wouldn't be, you know, and the next 2 months worth of shows, there wouldn't be, you know, blood was a point where the feud has reached a level where the arena's packed because of the feud is drawn, and like you're trying to sell it as like a real fight, and you have blood, and like that's how you blow this thing off, to where the next guy's like, I bloodied the guy, I beat him, and I move and I elevate myself. You know, it's all part of an equation in professional wrestling that's been successful, but it has to be predicated on the fact that, like, the suspension of disbelief is like people are thinking that this is kind of real, which is like why blood today doesn't really work, because, bro, it's like AEW's doing blood, but you're showing the guy geeking himself, you know, they've been putting the blade back in his mouth.
And it was the opening match.
Right, completely. It's completely.
Yeah, and that's like, that's both their fault. The cameraman for shooting it, and him for doing it out in the open.
Right. So you're wasting the whole concept of, like, we're trying to make it like Adam Page is bloodying you up because you guys are really fighting, but it never gets to that place anymore today, which is why WWE stopped doing it. You know, so I don't know.
A lot of times when guys are starting in the business, a lot of people don't know this, and they don't know how to gig. They'll have somebody else gig for them.
Right? Yeah.
I'd like to gig Joe. Nothing.
Maybe if Adrian Thomas and I have to settle our differences. You know?
I'd love to gig both of you.
Next is from Kevin Donald, and the subject is Cole versus Dolla. Long time no speak, guys. My question is about Top Dolla. Ever since he botched that top rope 5, I don't know, top rope dive. Michael Cole's been burying him on commentary. Now I get that he's just making jokes, etc., but in the kayfabe world, doesn't this kind of make Top Dolla look really bad? I mean, unless they're building towards a Top Dolla versus Michael Cole match, and please God, never let that happen. What's the point of Dolla being buried and never going after Cole? P.S. Disco, I know Billy's your boy and you're just being a good friend and covering for him, but check out his social media. All the guy does in all his Twitter accounts is get into arguments. He's a snowflake, no real man would freak out that often. Bro, I see his Twitter, which is I complain. That's his Twitter. If he wants to complain, whatever. I'll say this about the Top Dolla.
They didn't say that you're covering for him. Nobody's covering for him.
No, it's in the open.
Just because we say, just because we don't say what you want to hear, that doesn't mean we cover for him. Yeah. You're gonna get buried if you here, and if you listen to the show for any amount of time, you know that, but obviously you don't.
I like talking sports with the guy, and
right.
Like you're not going to convince me. You're not going to convince me to not like talking sports with the guy,
right? And you're not going to convince me the guy doesn't know his.
Right. It's exactly.
You know?
So,
bro, you know who I saw? This is what I was going to tell you the other day. You know who I saw on ESPN?
Who?
Old school friend of the show, Dennis, whatever.
Oh, do you know he's on Around the Horn?
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. No, okay.
And and I've seen him with a wrestling title belt.
Yeah, he's on Around the Horn.
And I've seen him a couple times with a wrestling belt on there.
Yeah.
Didn't he block you?
Yeah, he blocked. No, I just think he muted me. Probably. I think he muted me.
Okay.
I'd love to get back on the show.
Dennis, you're invited to come back on. I know that now you're on ESPN. You may be too big for us.
I don't think he likes me. He probably thinks I'm some type of toxic.
Yeah, he just wrote a book on the civil rights movement. So he's
a race baiter. He always talks about race.
I like him.
I liked him too. Let me get to Top Dolla, okay?
Yeah.
Bro, this is all designed because he's a heel,
right?
And he's acting like a gangster,
right?
But everybody can see he's a fake gangster, which is why Cole buries him. Which is why when this guy finally does get some heat, it's going to work because
that's Cole's job. Right. He's a heel. He's not supposed to put him over,
right? So yeah. Next is
unless he has heat and they told him to bury him, but
it could be,
right?
Could be, Next is from Tourist Wobbled,
right?
And the subject is goat. Hey K100, I was checking out clips in the latest Ric Flair podcast, and him and Conrad Thompson were talking about the greatness of this Bloodline versus Sami Zayn story. And Conrad said, quote, "It's one of the greatest stories WWE has done in years," unquote. And Flair replied, "It may be their greatest storyline of all time. I know that people in the wrestling business are known for crazy overpraise, hello Tony Khan, but really, is this one of the rare times where the overpraise is deserved? I mean, really, guys, can either of you three think of a storyline that's better than this? Austin versus Band, of course, is a classic, but Sami versus Bloodline has legit drama to it. Before I go, I'm so sick of the Billy critics. Get off his back. If it wasn't for Billy, we would never found out that Roman Reigns versus The Rock, Charlotte Flair versus Roll 100% confirmed for WrestleMania 39. Oh yeah, that's right. Billy sucks as a cancer to any show he's on. Whatever.
Reeled us in there.
Yeah, he reeled us in. Whatever, but that's not true though. So, what is this? I will say. Here's what I'll say. It might be the greatest storyline of all time because it was all done in basically vignettes and backstage clips. Like
other storylines that you like to remember.
Him and Roman sitting on a couch having conversations.
Right.
Like that's seriously.
What are some other storylines that you like? Yeah, I know, bro. It's an incredible storyline. We've
I'll never forget Hogan and Savage, the original one where they planted seeds all year. They were a team, and then Savage would look at him a certain way when he would put his arm around Elizabeth and stuff like that. Yeah, I'll never forget that, man.
The build up to Warrior and Hogan was great. The NWO was great.
NWO.
When the Cyndi Lauper with Roddy Piper, all that was great. Remember that, Glenn?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. How old were you when that happened?
Greatest angles of all time. Let let me think here. Hogan Andre, I think, is one of the greatest of all
87.
time.
Yeah.
Because of bro, I've read. Do you know what that match drew? Tony,
93
get a load of this.
93,000.
100,000 in
No,
Pontiac.
no, no,
Yeah,
no,
90
no, no, no,
Yeah,
no.
93.
They wrestled on a Saturday night's main event.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Okay, where they did the double
Oh yeah, they
referee.
drew a
the heavy,
huge number.
Mm-hmm.
just hypothetically, like right now, SmackDown does 2.5 million. That was like a huge number this week, right? Take a wild guess what the number was for that show. How many million? How many people
Like
watched
20?
it? 33 million
Wow.
people. Bro, that's
That's ridiculous.
let me look at what did the Super Bowl do this year?
Well, imagine how hot they were
last year.
Well, bro, the
Like super
playoffs
audience.
just did like 50 million.
Super Bowl did 99.18 million viewers in 2022.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, the playoffs right now, they just did like the Philly game did like 50 million, even though it was a blowout.
That's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, think about this. During our time period when we were doing this, when remember wrestling on cable television on Monday night at one time was drawing 10 to 11 million people combined between the two channels. Okay, USA and TNT, right?
Right.
Bro, when Monday Night Football went off ABC and went to ESPN, they were doing like 10 to 12 million people.
Right.
Like wrestling was on par with football in popularity. And like look at where they are today, 20
Yeah,
something
we were
years
more
later.
popular in baseball or basketball.
Way more popular. It wasn't even close, you know?
Yeah, we were killing them in the ratings.
Yeah.